Hi, my name is Cupin, and you are watching Rappler. I'm in Taguig City, where just a few moments ago, the Philippines and Japan held the second ever 2+2 ministerial summit or meeting between the defense and foreign affairs ministers of the Philippines and Japan. And before that, may isang malaking balita din nangyayari. Na-sign na ng Philippines at ang Japan yung Reciprocal Access Agreement. But first, let's talk about the 2+2 kasi kakakonclude nga lang niya. In fact, the room where I am standing outside of is where a joint press conference was held by Japan Foreign Minister Kamikawa Yoko, Japan Defense Minister Kihara Minoru, as well as Secretary of Foreign Affairs Enrique Manalo and Philippine Secretary of Defense Gilberto Chodoro. Ngayon, ano ba tong RAA na ito at ano tong 2+2 na ito? Na yung 2+2, the second iteration of which happened in Manila today, is it's a mechanism in which the defense and the foreign ministers of two countries meet together simultaneously. That happened today, but before that, nagkaroon din ng bilateral meeting yung foreign ministers at yung defense ministers ng Philippines at ng Japan separately. Now, what is this Reciprocal Access Agreement? Basically, it is a VFA or a Visiting Forces Agreement-like deal which will allow Japan's military and the Philippines military to visit each other's soil for things like joint exercises. But we will talk about that more a little bit later. Ngayon, we first want to highlight na the RAA was negotiated in record speed, at least for Japan and even for the Philippines. Now, to put into context, Japan has two other RAAs with other countries, Australia and the United Kingdom. The UK took 5 years to negotiate, whereas the Australian RAA with Japan took almost 5 years. In contrast, it took only the Philippines around 8 months for negotiations to conclude. Yung formal negotiations started in November 2023 and concluded, today with the signing at Malacanang Palace with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. witnessing yung pagpirma ni Secretary Chodoro at ni Japan Foreign Minister Kamikawa. So, just a quick timeline of the context of the RAA now. Yung first time na nag-commit publicly, at least yung Philippines at yung Japan, to completing or agreeing on an RAA was in April 2022 during the first ever 2+2 meeting between the ministers of the Philippines and Japan. Again, April 2022, therefore, this was under the previous or the tail end of the previous Duterte administration. And then in February 2023, when President Marcos visited Tokyo for his first official visit to Japan, this was also taken up publicly. Formal negotiations then commenced in November 2023. Kanina tinanong si Secretary Manalo kung anong factors came into play at bakit ang bilis ng negotiations. Again, 8 months compared to the RAA with Australia, which took 7 years, and the RAA with the United Kingdom, which took over 5 years to negotiate. Ang sabi naman ni Secretary Manalo, first, there was an existing framework. So if you'll read the full text of the RAA, which you can find it through the MOFA website of Japan, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or you can go to the Rappler Communities app, and we provided the direct link to the document there. Parang kumbaga, it shares a lot of similarities with the existing RAA with Australia. Second, sabi din ni Secretary Manalo, there was already a mutual understanding between the Philippines and Japan as to the importance of concluding and agreeing on the RAA. He did emphasize that difficult questions were raised, difficult issues were hammered out by negotiators, but he gave all the flowers to the negotiators of the Philippine and Japanese side for finding a way to agree on the difficult questions that he was referring to in eking out, and that led to today's event, again, the signing of the RAA. Now, itong RAA does not happen in a vacuum. Parang yung context nito is the Philippines and Japan have been strategic partners since 2011. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Strategic partners, normally the focus is on defense and security cooperation. In fact, Japan has been a huge partner for the Philippines strategically and security, also economically. But for security and defense, the Philippine Coast Guard's newest vessels are funded the bulk of the new vessels of the Philippine Coast Guard are funded through loans from Japan, and they have also committed to supplying or to helping the Coast Guard acquire 5 more 97-meter vessels. The Philippines is also the very first recipient of the official security assistance from Tokyo. That's a new scheme that they came up with so that they can help partners and like-minded nations in the region and beyond. Now, what's next for the RAA? It has to be ratified by the Philippine or agreed on by the Philippine Senate, at least a 2/3 vote. It should also be agreed on by the Japanese Diet or its legislature. We will give you updates when the RAA reaches that point. But so far, signing pa lang tayo. Now, ano bang context bakit nagkakaroon ng RAA? Well, bukod sa pag-build on a strategic partnership ng Pilipinas at Japan, siguro yung pinaka-context nito is a China that's becoming more and more aggressive and forward in its claims, not just in the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea, which most of us are familiar with, but also in the East China Sea, or in waters between China and Japan. Now, yung serious concern over Chinese actions in the East China Sea and the South China Sea, the stability in those waters was actually brought up when the Philippines, Japan, and the USA met in Washington, D.C. for the first ever trilateral meeting between the leaders of those three countries. Inulit siya kanina yung serious concern over Chinese actions, specifically in flashpoints like Ayungin Shoal or Second Thomas Shoal. In fact, kanina binanggit ni Minister Kihara, the Defense Minister of Japan, yung concern ng Tokyo over the June 17 incident wherein the Chinese Coast Guard harassed, towed, boarded, and destroyed equipment of the Philippine Navy, and the harassment of which also led to the injury of one soldier. Secretary Manalo also spelled it out, na parang yung regional tensions or yung geopolitical dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond, sabi niya, it's putting stress on the rules-based order, the stability of the rules-based order. So that's something that you have to understand kung bakit may mutual understanding, kung bakit important for both Tokyo and Manila to agree on an RAA. So, hindi lang ito yung engagement ng Japan at ng Philippines. The two countries are also part of, again, like I mentioned, yung trilateral meeting and cooperation alongside the United States. But also, a few months ago, nag-meet in Hawaii yung defense ministers ng US, Japan, Philippines, and also Australia. Yung tawag doon loosely is called the Squad. So, how does the RAA play into this? With the RAA now, parang mas magiging madali yung mga joint exercises. So, what's up on the table? Pwede magkaroon ng own bilateral exercise yung Japan at Pilipinas. At ibig din sabihin nito, yung Japan Self-Defense Forces can now join existing exercises, such as the Balikatan, that's the one between the US and the Philippines. But there's also a joint exercise between the the Philippines and Australia. So they also can opt in to join exercises such as that. So, Japan's take in all of this. Again, parang yung in-emphasize ng Japan through the embassy in Manila and through the MOFA or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Tokyo is that yung harassment or yung the term is attempts to unilaterally change the status quo in flashpoints like Ayungin Shoal or Second Thomas Shoal is not just a concern of the Philippines, right? The assertion of Japan and other like-minded countries is that it affects the world because it affects stability in the Indo-Pacific. And siguro that's a very important context to understand bakit importante ang RAA for Manila and Tokyo at bakit, kumbaga, hindi naman sa minadali, pero nagkaroon ng very clear yung sense of urgency in concluding these negotiations. Now, yung pinakatanong dito, what's next for the RAA? Well, bukod sa pag-ratify na pinanggit ko kanina, tinanong din sa press conference, like, will this lead to a mutual defense treaty-like agreement, which we have with the United States? Will it lead to something like the EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement with the United States also, providing Americans access to select locations or predetermined locations, military bases in the Philippines. Basically, sabi ni Secretary Manalo at ni Secretary Teodoro, we're not even thinking about that just yet. Parang that will be discussed should and if the need arises. But for now, it's focused on the RAA. Maganda yung sinabi ni Secretary Teodoro about yung moving forward part na ito. Bukod sa pag-ratify, parang the RAA now gives an opportunity for the Japan Self-Defense Forces and the AFP to create that mutual trust with each other. Again, through these joint exercises and joint drills between the two militaries. Kasi parang balikatan lang din to, no? Bukod sa parang optics of the two militaries working together, there are also very practical reasons why you need these joint exercises. It creates familiarity between officials, soldiers, the troops, in terms of yung practical level na parang familiarity with the terrain in the Philippines, familiarity with the terrain in Japan, familiarity with how their systems work, ang tawag din interoperability. So those are things that are being considered in, again, emphasizing the importance of developing mutual trust between the two armed forces or the two militaries of Japan and the Philippines. So, again, here in Manila today, na-sign yung RAA, Reciprocal Access Agreement, and a milestone in bilateral ties between Japan and the Philippines, yung second 2+2 ministerial meeting between the defense and foreign affairs ministers of the two countries. Marami pa mangyayari. We'll see how the RAA actually operationalizes, if that's the term that you want. Of course, bukod pa dun yung pag-ratify. We presume that the Marcos administration is confident that it has the numbers so that it passes in the Senate, hopefully for the Marcos administration rather smoothly. And then we also expect to see updates when the Japan Diet eventually ratifies the RAA. So again, this has been Bea Cupin. Tune in to Rappler. You can download the Rappler app, and then you can go to the Securities and Global Affairs channel. That's where I am, and that's where colleagues, Editor-at-Large Marites Vitog, for instance, are Ma'am Glenda Gloria is also there, exchanging thoughts with our readers and our followers about not just the RAA, not just the Philippines and Japan bilateral relationship, but key developments in the Indo-Pacific, the West Philippine Sea, and in the greater region, in Southeast Asia, in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific as well. Again, this has been Bea Cupin. You have been watching Rappler. If you have any questions, you can leave them on the Rappler Communities app, and I'll be logging in and I can answer questions there. We will be coming out with a longer report making sense of the RAA, the 2+2 between the Philippines and Japan, and making sense of the relationship, this ever growing and close relationship between the two Asian countries. Again, this has been Bea Cupin. Thank you for watching.